we're good.
I call this meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council Township of North Huron hereby accepts the agenda for October 19th, 2020 council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Councillor Heffer. I have Councillor McBurney. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we move on. There's no public here tonight, so we shall go past 4. Consent agenda. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent items 5.1.1 to 5.1.2. And further, that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives consent items 5.1.3 to 5.3.4 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Mr. Faulkner. Seconder, I have Mr. Palmer. Comments or questions? I'm going to drag out for you 5.3.3 to start with. And I just want to make comment that with the renovations they're doing, and they're adding on, I hope they're not going to ask for a hookup, because our council has a standing order of no hookups. The other thing that's going on is they did fill a form out saying they were using X amount of water, and we asked for the water you're using now and in the future, and this was about a year ago from Morris Turnberry, and they went around to all their people that are hooked onto our water and asked them how much they would need. So I hope we don't find ourselves again in a situation where they're using more water than they needed. This is the one where we asked Morris Turnberry to ask their everybody hooked to our water so that we know how much of a water tank we've got to build and the pipes we need, et cetera, for future growth. And it's the one where I think they're using 32 cubic meters of water a month or a year or something like that now, and they came back to us and said they only needed 30. Still haven't figured that one out myself, but so those are the two things. Just want to point that out. Anybody like to point anything else out? Not. Go ahead, Trevor.
Reeve, I guess for my, just as a follow up to your comment about this minor variance, I guess my question is that we as North Huron don't have any issue from a proposed bylaw or from a proposed minor variance. I'm glad. As an industry and as a growth for economic development, I'm all in support of the minor variance and the request. I think where just as a clarity for your perspective, and at least from the cross-border services committee is that I think it would be prudent that council asks staff to send out a message just indicating as such that we don't have any issue with the proposed minor variance. However, just to advise that under the current scenario that council has suggested no additional hookups until a cross-border services agreement can be reached. So that has not changed according to what anything has been discussed at this council. I'm just wondering if we should provide comment, to suggest that we don't have an issue as it relates to the actual minor variance. Our concern is exactly as the Reeve Bailey's indicated, is we don't want to continue to see connection requests for economic development purposes only to not have a discussion, not to be able to have a discussion about our proposals or whatever proposals or what suggestions we have going forward. I think ultimately we want to understand and keep it clear, we want economic development in the area, but we want it fair and equitable for both parties as it relates to that, and that's what we're planning on doing. So I'm just wondering if council would authorize us as staff to send that proposal, or at least the communication to Morris Turnberry as it relates to, because their public meeting I think is tomorrow night, so they can get that as a part of their communication, and at least we can be a part of that discussion going forward.
Carson, could you form that into a motion if we need?
Through your worship, yep, we can do that. I guess just for the benefit of council, so that agenda item 5.3.3, so for council's benefit, we are circulated on any planning application within 1 kilometer of a neighboring municipality, so this would be one of them. and just like how Monica does when she presents her comments received from the public or from agencies, that would be what Deputy Reeve Syke is referring to, and we can if that's what council's wishing, and then the expectation would be that their planner would read those comments at the time of their committee of adjustment hearing, which I believe is tomorrow, yeah.
Do I have a mover?
So, your worship, so you already have a motion on the floor,
Mhm.
which, so you'll wanna vote on that motion, and then you can.
All in favor? Carries. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Reeve, sort of a sidebar to what Trevor's saying. I'm just wondering, even after there's an agreement, or it can be part of a future agreement, like, we have to be cognizant of any development that leapfrogs, adds to itself, and thus utilizing more water and sewer. Right now, like, yeah, it's gonna be metered, but we have no idea. Like, it's nice to know ahead of time that, yeah, maybe they're gonna use double, like, nobody knows. And should we have a policy or a protocol or something that staff can just put into action that, I don't know. I'm just sort of at loss for what we do here. You know, it's our water, and we're not against hookups, you know, when we've got this agreement. We're not against development, we want it, but jeepers, we need to know, you know, a company's gonna double or whatever, they're gonna use more water in whatever regard. Like Rhone is an example, they have a certain amount of water, and they're gonna use more water. Well, not now, you know, if they drill, but, you see what I'm getting at?
Yep. In the agreement that we're working on with them, that we've offered them, that they've had for, I don't know, 3 months, I'll touch on that later. We have offered them X amount of water, which is way above and beyond what they need. And again, if they get back to us and talk to us at all, we'd find out, but we have offered that, so we know, moving forward, we know this is the water that you will need over the span of the next 20 years. Yeah, so we're on that, and anything above that would have to be renegotiated by some council way down the road. Did you want to speak to that, Trevor? Did I see your hand up? Or?
No, I just wanted to mention that is the discussion, is that, you know, the pre-existing agreement that we had prior was a lot of back and forth between councils of requesting connections, not requesting connections, whatever the case may be. The expectation of a new agreement is, here's the agreement, it's a 15-year agreement, 20-year agreement, whatever we have decided on at the time, but here's the capacity that you want, and therefore you determine how you use it. You're paying for the capacity, so you determine how you use it. If you want that development to have capacity, and therefore you're entitled to do whatever, you don't have to come to us for a connection, because you already have the capacity. You're paying for it. So at the end of the day, if you want a connection to X company, and it meets the criteria to what the agreement says, you tell your developer, yep, we'll get you water because we already have the agreement. Right now, we don't have that. So we don't have that ability to provide that solution, but right now we don't have that. So we don't have that ability to provide that solution, but that's the intention. That's the intention, is there's a lot less of this back and forth discussion about, oh, this development needs water. We didn't know that. You now have to monitor and manage them, not just come to us whenever you want them. It's a different scenario, and that's what we've been talking about exclusively about. We want it to be like that because we don't like the conversation back and forth. We would rather us have the ability to provide them with a set of rules and regulations where they don't have to come to us. They can support their municipality because they can say, yes, I do have water and sewer because North Huron has allocated me this amount of capacity that I can manage how I see fit. Right now, they don't have that because they have to come to us. We're saying give them a capacity and they manage it accordingly, only with approval from us. They would have the approval. That's what the agreement would reach out and look like.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Not seeing any. Did I call the motion?
So I'll just, as purposes from you, Carson, I would like to move that council direct staff to send a notice of response to the proposed minor variance, that North Huron has no issues as it relates to the proposed minor variance. However, a continued no connection to new services will be issued until a cross-border services agreement is reached.
Thank you. Seconder? I have Kevin. Comments, questions, concerns?
Still have a little comment. It does not stop the company from just digging into where they already have water, right? Like if they have a line going to building A and then building B over here, they can go there with their line and
That's a good
Like,
question. Do I have a staff member that can answer that, or can we look for it, or? New kid on the block?
Well, if I may,
Yeah.
Marie, typically no, if they're gonna be connecting towards property line, they still need to come back to the municipality to let us know that that's gonna be occurring. Having said that, I'd have to go back and look at the policies and whatnot to get a clear answer as to what North Huron does, but typically that's not. You can't just splice into like the valve or at property line.
And I would follow that by saying, I would think not either, because every member sitting at this council is personally responsible for the water. Somebody gets sick, they're coming after the town, and every one of us separately, you signed that agreement when you became councillors. And my concern would be a cross-contamination with the well. So you've got a well that went down and whatever, there was a silage went down with it near the barn or whatever, and then you hooked into it. It could feed back, and then you could contaminate people down the road, and then of course that falls back on the municipality. So I would let us know, because that would be a big worry several times anyway. Okay, I think I have a mover seconder, and I'm gonna ask.
Through your worship, if I could just read the motion here to make sure it's capturing what Deputy Syfe has intended. So that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to provide the following comments to Morris Turnberry. There are no concerns with the proposed Hempel Design / Maitland Welding minor variance application as circulated. And if any hookup requests are needed, they will be deferred until a cross-border servicing agreement can be reached between North Huron and Morris Turnberry.
Trev, yeah, and seconder was, Kevin's okay with it too? Okay, all in favor? Carries. Number 6 is public meetings, and we have none tonight. Number 7 is reports. 7.1.1 is the 2020-14 request for extension of draft plan and subdivision update. We're gonna have, I'm just gonna read it and we'll pass it, and then we'll have Monica speak to it. Sorry, yeah. The Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the planner dated October 19th, 2020 regarding the update of the request for extension draft plan of subdivision file 40T12000001 for information purposes. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin. Do I have a seconder? I have Chris. Okay, Monica.
Thank you, Bree. Good evening, Council. I'm here but my purpose tonight is to give Council an update and a heads up that an application for draft plan extension is coming. So, I won't say that long file number again, Steve's already said it. This is a draft plan of subdivision, that long file number again, Steve's already said it. This is a draft plan of subdivision that folks around the table will be familiar with. It's known as Wingham Creek subdivision, and it received draft approval, and the most recent extension is set to expire on January 2nd, 2021. So it's pretty much the last minute to apply for another draft extension now, and we expect that there will be a complete application received, and that we'll be able to verify that the folks making the application are authorized to act on the behalf of the 600 owners. At this point, the planning department is just working with Mr. Jose Maria Fernando Souza Medina. He goes by Jeff Medina. Jeff is just working on getting the application put together and commissioned in Malaysia where he is, and submitting that into the county. So at the next North Huron Council meeting, I will be bringing a report with a recommendation regarding the application for draft plan extension. So other than rehashing the development itself, I don't think that's a good use of our time, because most of council will be familiar with the proposed Wingham Creek plan of subdivision. At this time, there are some outstanding conditions on the draft plan of subdivision that the current owners and their representatives will have to address during the time of their extension, if their extension is approved. If they don't get their extension approved, or if they don't meet their conditions within the time period where their extension is approved for, the plan of subdivision that was approved with draft plan approval will be dissolved and won't be an existing plan anymore, and any new development that's proposed on these lands will have to start at the beginning part of a planning application for a plan of subdivision. So those are the stakes of this application for draft plan extension, and the representatives of the owners understand those stakes and they're taking it seriously, but at this point we don't have the full application in yet, and we're still working to verify the legal status of the representative on behalf of the owners. So perhaps I'll leave it at that and see if council has any questions.
I'm gonna open it up to council. Thank you, Monica. I'm gonna open it up to council for comments. Just before I give it over to Trevor, I want to tell you guys that I've got about a year into this and it's aged me 10. Go ahead, Trevor.
So, I have some real concerns, you know, as a counselor and as a resident of North Huron and a resident of Wingham. We need this development. We needed it 5 years ago. We have now had, in 8 months, we've now talked to 4 different individuals as it relates to this property. The applicant is different than the applicant we just talked to 3 weeks ago. So the frustrating part of this discussion is they seem to can't get straight who does or who doesn't have controlling interest in this property. And I'm almost to the opinion now is, how do I even believe, application comes, how do I even believe who has control? Like, that's where I'm at. Like, I just cannot believe that in 8 months, staff and council have talked to 4 different individuals about a piece of property to get development. Like, that is in my mind ludicrous in a discussion of a piece of property who's had draft plan subdivision approval since 2014. 6 years. Like, that is just ridiculous. In hindsight to that, my comment is a discussion about, I know we need this development, but I'm not willing to risk something because somebody else can't get their ducks in a row and they're figuring out. We as North Huron have nothing invested in this other than staff resource time, which, let's be clear, has been ridiculous. But we don't have much to lose as opposed to other than tax revenue coming in. They have more to lose than us, significantly. And I still stand by the fact that they need to understand the real pressure that this is, and I still believe that, you know, I honestly to this day cannot tell you whether I would support a draft plan subdivision agreement with anybody on that group based on what I've heard from that group completely. And And arguably, the only way I would even contemplate potentially draft extension is with hard deadlines. Meaning, here's what you need to accomplish. If you bypass any of those, it's gone. It's done. If you got to get to A, well, A, you got till September, whatever, to fit it. And if you don't meet that, then it comes back to council and denied. We need to hold these people accountable to this extension because they have a lot more to lose than we do. In my mind. We haven't had that tax revenue for 6 years. I don't know that anybody on this council would probably guarantee we're not going to get that tax revenue in the next 6 years based on how we've been perceived or how information has came to us regards to this development. So the only position I have, I want this development, but it's on a real short lease in my opinion, from my perspective, because we have used staff resources to the nth degree to get this thing forward, and they seem to not have the same worry because they seem to believe that we're just going to continue to extend it because we need it more than them. And I would argue we don't. Because we have other developments, Hutton Heights, Blythe, East Wallinosh has land too. We got lots of other options that we should be focusing on instead of this particular development. Wingham really wants it, Wingham really needs it, but at what cost? Because I think they need it more than us from an investment that we've heard about. So that's just my comment, I think, from my perspective is those are the things that are really resonating with me as it relates to this development. And I think that they're gonna have to come with a real sharp pencil in order to tell me how they're gonna get from where they are today to a planned subdivision agreement and shovels in the ground, and then then the conversation may talk. But if they don't have any of that, I will tell you right now that I will not be, my opinion will be not giving them extension. And that's my opinion.
Thank you. Just before we go any further, I've been in so many closed meetings about this, so many open meetings, I'm a little afraid to talk in case I say, can we talk about what we're asking this group to come up with from a county and town point of view, or is that behind the scenes still?
I think I can maybe speak to that.
Just to help, it's just for Trevor, so.
So, yes, the township will have to negotiate a development agreement with the current representative from the owners. And I don't know if we can talk about the particulars of what would be in that development agreement. But you would be working with this new representative for the owners and the township staff that are part of negotiating that development agreement will be representing from the township side what you need in order to make the development work. For the application for draft plan extension, we won't be getting into those details. We will just simply be asking them to outline what conditions are still outstanding and how they intend to meet those conditions. So to Councillor Seep's point, you know, the way that about how they intend to meet the conditions will influence the report that I bring and influence the recommendations, I think.
Did you want to talk to that before I open it back up to the floor? Or?
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Kevin?
Thank you, Monica, through your brief, you answered one of my first question. Second question was the ability and the time frame. All the other representatives came before council and presented what their vision was and was face to face with us. Is it my understanding that that's not going to happen this time?
Well, I spoke to the representatives on Zoom this morning, so it is possible to communicate with them, but they are in Malaysia, so they won't be coming to a physical council meeting.
And just further for your reference, Kevin, the 640 people that own this are pretty well from Malaysia. Just so.
No, I knew I got a list of all the people
Oh, that's
that,
right, too,
that have invested in it. No, mine was just, you can usually tell when you ask someone a personal question or a personal question towards the project face to face, and you can tell whether they're sincere or whether they've got their things in a row or not. Thank you, that was just my question.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Monica, I think you more or less answered it. Deputy Reeve Sype asked you for the hard timelines, that we gotta have them. Will that be coming at the next meeting? Like, is that going to be correspondent to Mr. Medina?
So that would be something that, that could be a recommendation coming out of the presentation that I do at the next council meeting. If, in reviewing my recommendation and reviewing what the applicants have put together in terms of their application for draft plan extension, if the township wanted to recommend some milestones. So for example, these applicants are talking about applying for a 1-year draft extension. But if within that 1 year, you wanted to see X happen within the first 3 months, Y happen within the first 6 months, and so on and so forth, then you could make a recommendation that a condition be added to the draft plan conditions, that those requirements be met within those sub-timelines within the 1-year extension.
Thank you.
I'm gonna give just a little bit, there's something I wanted to bring out, and I wasn't sure I could, and Dwayne and I had a sidebar moment here. This council's worked very hard on this. This council's worked harder than any other council on this. We have pushed and shoved, and we've had some good people representing them, and through no fault of our own, that's disappeared and others have come on. One of the recommendations or one of the commitments they'll have to make, or one of the things they have to do before it can come back before this council, is they have to have proof, legal proof, that they represent that they're the proper representation for A2A, Wingham Creek, call it what you like. Because the problem's been all along, from our understanding, is that there was never enough votes for anybody except the original Weston group to do that, and nobody seems to know where the Weston group disappeared, so we can't get them to sign off on it. When I say we, they can't get them to sign off on it. And there's not been enough votes at any meeting to give the legal right for the person that's been representing to actually represent them. No fault to their own, they thought they did. But this council and this staff have taken the unprecedented step of saying, prove it before we go any further. We're done. Just to follow up with Trevor, you're right, it's sinking like a sunset. Okay, Trevor. Oh, was somebody else first?
Well, you were
Trevor
talking
and then
about-
Chris.
So as part of this draft plan subdivision, it's really more of a question or comment to Monica. As part of your recommendation, you are part of these planned subdivision agreements much more in depth than we as council are.
Okay.
So I guess my question is that if a person of this magnitude, of this group, where they are at in the process, are you able to provide council with whether their time, like, willing to, and this is only me, so I'm talking, I'm not willing to give them a year if they should be able to accomplish the tasks in 6 months. I want to say you have 6 months, because what's happened is they've had 6 years, and they had 5, and they didn't do anything, or at least very little. So continuing to give them 1-year extensions isn't, in my mind, reasonable, in the sense where if planning can tell me of the time what they have left to accomplish, is what they have left to accomplish is supposed to take, in a normal sense, 6 to 8 months, then I would be okay with maybe giving them 8 months. But I'm not gonna give them a year. They're gonna, like I said, in my respect, they're going to be on a short leash, but I need planning and development, in sense you and your team at Huron County, to give us that information as to whether what they have left adequately should take a year, or should it take less. I guess that's the part that I don't know whether you may not know, or because I know I can tell you right now, I will not. I have no idea what they have left. Well, first of all, I have no idea what they have left. And 2, I have no idea how long some of those hurdles may take. Like, I wish they would take 2 weeks, but you know, I understand municipal government, and it's probably a lot longer than that. So I don't know if you're able to give us that that information as part of your recommendation. And if you are, I think that's important, at least it is to me. I don't know what the rest of council feels, but would be important to me.
Yeah, through you, Reeve Bailey. Thank you, Deputy Reeve, for the question. I'm gonna be perfectly frank with you. It's more than just the planning department that's involved in the parts that are the fulfilling of those conditions. So the value added and the expertise that planning and development brings to the table is largely focused on the part that precedes the draft plan approval, reviewing the design, conducting public meetings, making sure that the what I call the principle of development has been established. So should a residential development with this many units that are single detached, this many units that are multiple attached, should this type of a development go forward for the benefit of the community? And so we look at, you know, will there be appropriate services available? When it gets to the point of the draft plan conditions, I use the word technical to describe those things. They're not philosophical, like should a residential development go here. They're technical. How do we provide the street infrastructure, waters and sewer lines there? The thing is that that technical aspect, in my experience, and we don't do that many subdivisions, but in my experience, it can take a long time, even just to negotiate the particulars of what it's actually not usually the municipality's side that slows it down. The municipality usually knows what they want to put in a development agreement, but there's a certain amount of back and forth and negotiation that happens from the developer side. So there's things like securities that have to be paid in order to address the costs of the infrastructure that needs to be built. And developers tend to drag their feet on providing things like securities. So I think that I can't fully answer that question, but I hope that my answer just now gives you a little bit of insight into the type of thing that's in those draft plan conditions. And I do agree with the comment that was made earlier. Planning and development is gonna have to look at what's received from the applicants in terms of how realistic what they're providing is in terms of justifying their requested extension, and we will make a recommendation accordingly. When it comes to the value added that planning is looking at, the big question that we're asking ourselves as planners is granting this extension of a draft plan that was approved in 2014 out into 2020-21, too far away from the policy regime that approved that subdivision and the justification and philosophical, milieu of all those considerations that went into that approval. Has so much time passed that we're now so far away from the 2014 way of thinking and the public consultations that happened in 2014, that a new reality of 2021, 2022 should mean that they should have and replan this thing. So that's more what my recommendation is based on. Less about the timing of addressing the technical considerations and more about whether we've gone too far away from the policy regime that justified this application in the first place.
Thank you very much, Monica.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, through you, Reeve. Thanks, Monica. You did touch on a couple things. The security one was the rabbit hole I was going for. I don't know legally how far we can go, but like, how serious are these folks, you know? So put your money where your mouth is. And I was wondering, I don't know, can we ask for a bond? Can we, some security that, I don't know, gives them more oomph to do their job. Of course, they get it back if they get their job done. I don't know if we can legally do that or not, but,
Through your
Yeah.
worship, we collect securities as part of the agreement.
there we go.
Thank you, Christopher, or Kevin, sorry.
I think it's to Monica through your, being that the project has been out, I will use the word outstanding for several years and gone into extensions, I would think that some of the, or if not all, the technical questions would have already been raised. We had the last fellow talking that they were going to be, shovel ready last August. So if you're going to be, we're anticipating being shovel ready in August, you would have had to answer all those technical questions, rather than going back to the start. Are any of those questions answered? Like, how closer are we to the end than starting over? Because if they've met some of those, that I don't know what they would be and if they have, but I just think over that 6 or 7 years, 1 or 2 questions would have gotten asked, and that would have put the subdivision at least a step further into satisfying the conditions. If it's been, now 6 or almost 7 years, and none of those technical questions have ever been answered, I can't see it being in the time frame of another 4 years. If that's the case, if they've never gone past just putting money into a project and never trying to go ahead with it.
Through you, Reeve, my offering on that would be that until a development agreement is signed, it's subject to negotiation with that developer, and they could, things that have been agreed to. So they'll probably say there's more than one way to skin a cat, and that they wanna potentially talk about doing things differently. But to flip it over back on them, when they fill out their application form and they say why they haven't been able to meet the conditions to date, part of them making a really good justification of that they have made progress. We're familiar with the development agreement that was negotiated with our predecessors. We're prepared to accept this, and this. So that, depending on whether we get that level of detail, might influence the type of recommendation you get from the planning department and what your own judgment will be about whether the application should be extended or not.
My question was stemming, my question was stemming through that it would be different if we were dealing with a different owner. We've been dealing with the same 600 people for 7 years. It's their problem with their contractor if they don't make deadlines and such. But it's still the same people, so it's not a different buyer. Or these are the same people. So like I said, they should have had within 6 years at least demanding that their money at least it went forward, or show me what we've made progress here. I know they're having a trouble with their first contractor or developer, but unfortunately that's not North Huron's problem. That's their kitty cat. But we're still dealing with the same people, and if we're not getting any answers from the same people we haven't gotten in 6 years, I can't see getting an answer any different in the next 6.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Trevor.
I just wanna follow up. So what I did hear from Monica is part of your recommendation, Monica, I'm gonna maybe ask a question to Dwayne. As part of that recommendation, will you have some input as to what aspects of this agreement have not been reached and how long you think it would take to satisfy those arrangements for council's perspective, I guess? I understand, obviously, I completely understand, Monica, that you may not, from a planning perspective, may not have the technical answers to some of these questions, but the staff should. And so I'm wondering if it's a collaborative recommendation to council as it relates to this, because that's my position, is that I want hard deadlines. Like I can't live with the giving them a year anymore. I need something more concrete, and I think ultimately we have to get something for. I would either like to see this move forward or go off the agenda of this council to move on from, and that's where I sit on it. So I'm here. I'm seeing Dwayne shake his head, so I'm just saying that I would think that's part of the arrangement we can make.
Yeah, through you, Reeve. I think that absolutely we are definitely have been in conversation with staff, and will continue to leading up to our recommendation and reviewing what we get from the applicant together to sort that out. But without massaging the process too much, maybe I can give an example to illustrate your point. So say council was inclined to recommend an extension for say a year, which say that's what the applicant is asking for. But you wanted to make some hard deadlines within that year. You could say something like, development agreement with securities paid will be accomplished within the first X number of months of that year. So there could be stipulations within that extension. And I could work with staff to see if there was something like that we would come up with as a recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Right, Chris?
Through you, Reeve. Monica, can you go as far as saying, we require 10 homes to be built by a particular date?
Well, the
Because they
houses
already
can't be
said that
built
they
until
would.
everything's done, right? So if they got everything completed and the draft plan registered within the year, then they turned around and built 10 homes, we're past the point of them applying for extensions or anything like that. They're done, they're good, they're going. So no, I think it would have to be more like something to do with the different conditions that are on the draft plan approval, how far they've gotten with that.
Thank you, Monica. Anyone else? Not seeing any. I believe I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Carries. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
7.1.2 is the 2020 25 AODA website compliance extension request. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the clerk dated October 19th, 2020 regarding the AODA website compliance extension request for information purposes, and further that the council supports the request from the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee Municipal Working Group to support the AODA website compliance extension request to as passed by the Corporation Township of Amherstburg. Hmm?
Do you want to get a mover first and I can speak to it?
Yeah. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, I have Trevor seconding. Oh yeah, go ahead, Carson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report's pretty straightforward. So as council has seen, the attachment that was included with this report is a resolution that was passed by the town of Amherstburg. And basically in that resolution, they're requesting that the provincial government extend the WCAG 2.0 level AA web accessibility compliance date. Currently that date is January 1st, 2021, and their recommendation is that the province extend it to January 1st of 2022 instead. And so what this requirement means is basically that all content on all municipal websites must meet that level of accessibility by this January 1st deadline. And so penalties if for public sector entities who can't meet that, the fines are up to $100,000 for each day or part of a day on which the offense occurs or continues to occur. And so with the declared COVID-19 pandemic, obviously municipal resources have been allocated in other areas, and focus has been on other areas. So municipalities are definitely finding it difficult to conform with these accessibility requirements by the upcoming deadline. So as council's aware, myself as the clerk sits on the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee Municipal Working Group, which includes all the lower tiers of Huron County, the county clerk, and the county accessibility coordinator. And so at this meeting, we discussed the resolution that was passed by the town of Amherstburg. And basically, the consensus was, yes, it's going to be hard for all municipalities to meet this deadline, and that we as the municipal working group would find it beneficial if the province was able to extend the deadline to meet compliance, and to also potentially consider funding to support and train municipalities on how to meet these compliance standards. So basically the recommendation of this report is that North Huron support the resolution of the town of Amherstburg, and basically a similar report will have gone to all the lower tier councils in Huron County, and the hopes is that we would combine those recommendations and provide them to the province and hopefully move that deadline a little further down the road. So financial impact, there's no financial impact to supporting the correspondence that was received by the town of Amherstburg. However, as I indicated already, there are going to be some associated costs with any potential fines, as well as some costs might be incurred to remediate non-accessible documents that are required by legislation to be posted on the website. So in the future considerations section of the report, for the benefit of council, I'll just kind of walk through if for some reason the province was to not extend the deadline. Basically, we've developed a plan on how to make our documents accessible by that deadline. As of right now, we would operate in 2 phases, with the first one being the legislated documents. So these are the documents that are required by some sort of legislation to be posted on the municipal website. So whether it's a study that was conducted or something along those lines that we would need to make accessible. So as of right now, North Huron staff who are working on the creation of our new website are supposed to be identifying those non-accessible documents that need to be posted and sending them to me, and then basically once I have a compiled list of the total number of pages or the total number of documents that need to be made accessible, we would identify that, and I've been working on obtaining external quotes for an entity who could remediate those documents, and we would offset that expenditure by using the accessibility budget line of the 2020 budget. And then the intention is that that North Huron staff who are working on website content would also make a note of their discretionary documents. So as in documents that are not necessarily required by legislation, but in an ideal world, we'd have them made accessible already for the benefit of the public, and to enhance the overall experience of the new website. However, in order to address this upcoming deadline, that's why we've kind of approached it in 2 phases. And then I guess the last thing to note is, so during the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee working group meetings, we also discussed how we would deal with content that is on the municipal websites that you can't necessarily make accessible. For example, sometimes on agenda packages we see handwritten correspondence that comes in, or planning applications. A lot of the stuff in there, you simply can't make those drawings accessible. So there was discussion on whether we would put basically a blanket statement saying contact the clerk department for an accessible version of anything you see on the websites that's not accessible. However, in our research, we don't know whether that's sufficient or not. So basically, the advisory committee, what we landed on is we're working on a policy that would be almost implemented by all the municipalities in Huron County, explaining how we hope to achieve accessible documents and how we hope to address any concerns for anything on our website as it relates to accessibility. So right now that's with a couple members of the working group who are working to formulate that a little further, and then so I'll be bringing that back at a future council meeting. So I guess the one thing I want to reiterate here is, so we're going through the process for a new website. So anything that is physically on the website is accessible. This is more to do with attachments to the website, right? So say the website says refers to a PDF of some sort. That PDF has to be made accessible as well, and that's what we're looking to address here. But I guess to put your mind at ease a little, anything we're writing to actually physically appear on the website without being an attachment to somewhere else. When we were going through this new website process, all that will be made accessible. So it's just the attachment of non-accessible PDFs at this point.
Thank you. Questions? Christopher?
And through you, Reed. Carson, I guess I've been overthinking this. I had a hard time understanding what? It's a website. Whatever's accessible would be what staff wants on. So basically, so I understand, it's going to make it content more accessible for the public in general. Basically, that's what this group is asking, right?
Through your
But
worship.
that's what the outcome is gonna be.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer. Yeah, so basically accessibility, under these standards might be looking to ensure that anyone's screen reader could read what's on your municipal website, right? So for example, anything that is that should be on our website, someone with a screen reader or someone who's visually impaired should have the ability to read that content on the website now.
Okay.
So basically you have to develop it with everything has to be developed with certain fonts, certain color contrast. And there's a bunch of guidelines of how everything has to be developed in order to meet standards, right? So picture images, basically the picture needs to have a description of what the picture is embedded into it, so that someone's screen reader can say, this is a picture of an aerial view of X property, that kind of thing, right?
Okay,
So,
all right.
Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. I have the movers. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. 7.2.1. This is the tax treatment of vacant lands, that the Council Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated October 19th, 2020 regarding the property tax treatment of vacant commercial and industrial land. And further, the Council directs staff to advise the County of Huron that North Huron supports the elimination of the vacant commercial and industrial land tax rate discount. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin and I have Paul seconding. Who would like to speak to this one, if anybody? Oh, first of all, let's have Don speak to it.
Yes. Thank you, Reed. So in the commercial and industrial tax classes, vacant land and excess land receive a tax rate discount of 70%. So the vacant and excess tax rate is 70% lower than is 70% of the full commercial and industrial tax rate. So it's like the elimination of the vacant unit rebate. We need to have public consultation before we go ahead with this. And the main reason that we want to go ahead with this is because in 2020 already, the provincial portion through the education piece on your tax bill, the province already implemented this change. So in 2020, if you had vacant or in commercial land, the education tax rate would be the same as full commercial, where ours is only at 70%. So we're trying to make this more consistent is the basic reason behind that. So a survey is being done by the county because this type of tax decision is made at the upper tier. They're gathering the information. I sent the information about this with the county news release and the link to the county survey to the BIA, so they can be discussing it there. And after the survey is completed, it closes on October the 26th, and the county has a tax consulting group called MTE, and they're going to compile a report with all the survey results and what found and present that to county council, and then county council will make a decision after that. So hopefully we can have this in place for the 2021 tax year. If the county council does make the decision to proceed with this, then it has to go to the minister for approval. So are there any further questions or anything I could elaborate on further?
Go ahead, Paul.
If you read, Donna, that means there's gonna be more than that 15% going to school tax, and I take it? Like from that 30%, they're collecting that, they're gonna be collecting that, right off the bat, right?
So right now, like on a commercial excess land tax bill, there is the municipal tax rate, the county tax rate, and then the education tax rate. So our tax rate is 70%, or is 70% of our full commercial rate, but the education portion is not. The education excess rate and a full commercial rate is the same. Is that what you're?
Oh,
Am I saying
The-
that clear enough?
that money's coming, we gotta get that through taxation though, right? Like for them to collect that?
Well, through education, like, the province sets the education rates and we
Mhm.
collect that regardless of what their rates are. We're the collector for both the education and the county. But we're trying to match up with what they're doing, and as I said, they charge excess land the same rate as full commercial land, so that's what we want to do too.
Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.2.2, that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives a report from the Director of Finance dated October 19th, 2020 regarding the Phase 2 Safety Restart funding for information. And further, the Council supports in principle the need for additional funding under Phase 2 of the Safety Restart funding for COVID-19 related expenses which exceed funds received under Phase 1. And further, the Council authorizes the Director of Finance to proceed with preparation of the Phase 2 application. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin and I have Rick second. Donna, would you mind speaking to that again?
Yes, Reed, thank you. So under Phase 2 restart funding, the first step was to make sure that we will have fully spent our first $138,500. So we've been tracking those expenses, and so we have just over $30,000 in actual physical COVID-related things, sanitizer, the glass, all these sorts of things. And then we've been tracking through Vicky's department the extra wages. We've set up extra wage tracking accounts to and adjusted the timesheet so that her staff can track the extra cleaning and sanitizing and things that are over and above their normal wages and relating strictly to COVID. And then we we've issued about $16,000 worth of refunds from Vicky's department as well. So that is a loss of revenue, which we are claiming as part of this. And then if you remember, we waived about $11,000 or $12,000 in total for our tax penalty and our water and sewer penalty. So that all comes up to about $77,000. And then council approved a report for the recreation department for about $44,000 in additional staff funding to the end of the year. So that puts us up at around the $121,000. So I know that by the end of the year, we're going to have used up the $138,500 that we got. So you need to make sure that you can use that before you can go ahead and apply for Phase 2. So Phase 2 involves a lot of documentation, and one of the main things is a complete forecast to the end of the year. So you can't cherry pick items and say, oh, I'm going to need an extra recreation staff for $44,000. I'll apply for $44,000. You have to go through every department and figure out, well, if you had savings because people didn't go to travel and training, that would offset somewhat your extra expenses. So it's quite an exercise to undertake, and so I'm going to be requesting the extension to November 6th to get this work all done and sent in. But at the end of the day, it is actually quite possible that we wouldn't qualify, but you won't know unless we go through this whole exercise. So as I said, for the November 2nd meeting, I will have this forecast done in conjunction with all the department heads that are working on it. We're working towards Thursday's meeting first, and then working on this. So we'll have that forecast done by then, and then we can discuss it at that time. But if there's any shortfall at all, then it's worthwhile applying for it, whether it's $5,000 or $10,000 or what it is. So that's what I would like to do, and it'll be good information to have, and I guess we'll see what happens with the forecast numbers.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Trevor, and then Kevin.
So is this funding and all the funding that we're talking about with regards to COVID-19, is it relating to both revenue and costs or just costs?
Both revenue and expenses. Operating only, not capital.
Yeah, I'm capital. I wouldn't expect them to, but again, operating revenue is for most municipalities is a big deal. Costs are costs. You're gonna have more costs when you reopen than you would have if you were closed. COVID has caused a lot of our municipality in the recreation perspective, because we were closed, we couldn't collect revenue either. the savings was there when we had, there was savings because of when you're closed, you don't have the wages and salaries as opposed to the fixed costs. But that's why I wanted to make sure I was clear on, it's both operating revenue as well as costs and not just costs. Cause I would find it very difficult for us to get to 130,000 in increased operating costs because of COVID. Just in what I was thinking, but if you took into consideration both cost increase and revenue decline, then I could see us making 130,000 fairly easily in my mind. So I just wanted to clear in my head, clear understanding it was just revenue, because you did say revenue. I wanted clarity to make sure that was the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Kevin?
Thank you for your, the cost of the monumental amounts of paperwork that the government requires to go through for a grant and the gathering of that, would those staff wages not be able to be also put into that request? Because it's a request that they're requesting this information to validate. Is there any time, can we recuperate any of that? Like you were saying that if we may not qualify. Well, that's a lot of man hours and a lot of staff and a lot of things that we're not doing because we're jumping through hoops for the government. The wages not be able to put back into there to recoup them.
Good question.
Through you. So, it's at our, as I said, you have to justify every line, I guess. They don't want it line by line, but you have to go line by line in order to get to the bottom line. So, like a lot of grant applications, we do spend money on staff time and outside engineering time, and we're often not successful. So that definitely could be the case here. I guess the one thing with the wages is that as part of this, like, we have budgeted for full salaries and wages for all staff for this year, and some were off, etc. So, I mean, I can take a look at that and keep track of, in general, how many hours we spend on it and see whether that, you know, there's some spots to put notes in and see if I can add that in, but at this point, I don't know if it'll make much of a difference or not, but certainly something I can keep in mind when we're preparing, for sure.
Thank you, Don. Anyone else? Not seeing any. We have a mover and seconder, so I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Okay, Recreation and Community Services, 7.3.1. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report prepared by the Director of Recreation and Community Services dated October 19th, 2020 regarding the Wingham Memorial Day Ceremony 2020 for information purposes. And further, the Council agrees to allow the Remembrance Day ceremony to proceed as described in the attached letter, subject to completions with COVID-19 protocols. Compliance, I apologize. Do I have a mover? I have Rick, I have Chris seconding, and if you don't mind, my dear, you're up.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. Before you this evening is a report regarding requests we received from the Wingham Legion to hold a Remembrance Day ceremony for 2020. Under the current regulations for COVID-19, outdoor public gatherings are permitted up to a maximum capacity of 25 people, and as long as social distancing measures are in place. The Wingham Legion has been in close contact with the Huron-Perth Public Health Unit, and they've been discussing their plans with them, and in order to meet the regulation or protocols that are in place, they've modified their ceremony for this year. The ceremony will be different. It will certainly be different because it's going to be much smaller in scale, shorter in length, and it will be closed to the public. The Legion will also be discouraging the public from even attending in terms of, standing at a distance and things like that. They're going to have volunteers on site to disperse individuals from gathering. The Legion is, however, planning to stream the ceremony live on Facebook.
and will be promoting the public watch from their home, business, or workplace. The Legion is not requesting any road closures, barricades, or any other support from the township. You may recall in the past that they closed the road there, and there's been approximately 200 people there gathered and things, and along the roadway. That is not the case for this year. There are no requests for any support from the township. They're simply requesting that the municipality support the request to be able to go on municipal property to do the ceremony, is basically it. Staff have been in touch with public health, and public health, as well as our emergency coordinator has indicated that the steps or measures that the Wingham Legion has put in place actually exceeds what public health is requiring, and they do not see any issues with it moving forward. Earlier today I received an email from Tim Poole with the Wingham Legion, and attached to it was a letter that had come out from their commander, Dennis Schmidt, just reiterating what they are allowed to do and things, and they've recapped, kind of just a quick recap of conversations they've had and things, but it's stated very clearly in there the ceremony is to be closed to the public, and the public is not to be invited, and that's to be communicated through the local media, Facebook and other social media, etc., that the event is closed. It's considered a private event this year. And that, again, they are to make it available online if they can, use low amplification for the event so that it's not attracting people. And there are to be no parades, including the color party. The color party can only have a maximum of 6 flags at the cenotaph. And that's just a few things that I'm mentioning here and things, and it talks about social distancing and masks being worn, and they also have to do the contact tracing and track who's been there, and they have to screen their members upon arrival and things like that. So I just want to let council know that they are following these protocols, and again, it is exceeding what public health has put in place and things. And based on that, based on what's been put in place, staff feel that we should support this, or give them a permission to go on the property and have the ceremony.
Thanks, Vicky. Questions, comments, concerns? We'll start with Paul. Go ahead.
Yes, through you, Ray, but yeah, Vicky, I commend them on the work that they did. You say they exceeded the health standards, and kudos to them. It's just great seeing that, honoring the fall heroes. Thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, it's a crying shame that it's come down to this. That's my main comment. It's gonna be hard to keep people away because, so many of them have relatives that have fallen, and, yeah, they can go home and do it personally, that's what it's gonna come down to, and, yeah, my heart goes out to those folks. It's what we're gonna have to do, and, I'm just gonna sit here and say I don't like it, but, it seems to be the rules of the day, and, not happy about it.
Anyone else? Quick Trout?
Yeah, I would just like to comment, this is not going to be the only one. This is not gonna be the only public event that this municipality has had. I'm gonna say it right now, there's a pretty good chance that there will not be a Santa Claus parade in the township in North Huron due to COVID restrictions. So the sooner we start having these discussions now, the sooner we can go on our merry way and try to figure out other options to make it, to ensure that we still have the same respect for these types of events in our own way, and still maintain the understanding that we are in a pandemic. Regardless of what the statistics say and what the medical data states, we are in a pandemic, and that's, we have to resonate with that discussion. I think ultimately, you know, everybody is going to, you know, the municipality is definitely served as a reminder of these types of events, that they're very dear and near dear to the municipality's heart. Like, you know, Remembrance Day, we've made a significant change, you know, in changing daycare operations and those types of things to ensure people could commemorate, you know, Remembrance Day as it was meant to be commemorated. But we also have the realistic approach that we are in a pandemic. So as I vocal the same thing with Mr. Councillor Palmer, I agree with you. I hate the fact that we have to talk about not having these types of events that are near and dear to people's hearts. But again, the problem is, if we don't do it, there's a greater risk to public safety if we don't. And I think ultimately I would rather us face on the side of caution as it relates to these types of things. But, you know, there's a lot of events in a lot of communities that have not happened, and you know, we have to bear the brunt. But this type of event is a major step in where, you know, people need to find other options, other ways to commemorate the people who have fought for this country and given us the freedoms that we deserve. I've said it for many, many years. Remembrance Day should be every day. It doesn't have to be November 11th. It should be every day. And people, whether they want to do that or not, that's their own prerogative. But, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, in this day and age, you know, I don't see us changing that way through public safety for quite some time. Like we may be having this conversation about Remembrance Day next year. There's no mistake about it. We're not out of the woodwork here yet, and we will continue to have these discussions from a municipality as to relates to what events we want to hold on municipal property because of issues about liability and safety of public safety. So, you know, I completely agree with you. I don't like to have the conversation. I hate to be the bearer of bad news for a lot of events in this municipality, but I think we have to bear on the side of caution in a lot of these senses.
Thank you, Trevor. Anyone else? I'll just follow up and finish with the agreeing with the councillors, and all the councillors and staff will agree. It is the fallen that give us the freedom we have now, and we should never forget that. I'm a little concerned. I wish they would put the barricades up, because I know an 84-year-old grandma mom that's going to be down there. So I would rather that they had the barricades up if they wouldn't mind, just in case they do get a few down there and somebody that doesn't pay enough attention comes around that corner. It's a sharp corner. But you can have that conversation with them, Vicki. But yes, I agree with everything that's said, and it's a shame, but it is part of what we have to deal with so that we can have a future moving forward. Okay, so I have movers. Can I, seeing no one else's hands, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. 7.4.1, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receive the report from the Director of Public Works and Facilities dated October 19th, 2020 regarding the outcome of the building condition assessment for information, and further that the Council directs staff to recommend the 2021 capital project during the budget process for buildings based on the FCI ranking. And further that Council provides direction to staff regarding the future of the North Huron Museum as at a future Council meeting. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, seconding is Chris. Mrs. McCarthy, would you mind?
Yes, thank you, Yuri. Capital Management Engineering Limited completed visual and non-destructive site assessments of 11 buildings. The purpose of the assessments was to provide a facility and condition index for each building. The FCI determines a building's overall condition. Most of the township buildings are in relatively good condition with the exception of the Wingham Museum and the Wingham Public Works building. The condition for both of these was rated at fair. Attached to this report is a previous staff report that went in depth as to the process for the RFP. It provided information on how a multi-site building condition assessment and capital plan for North Huron building was going to be completed. The reports provide year-over-year plans for repair, maintenance, and replacement costs associated to the buildings. The recommendations and timelines in the reports were obtained by investigating background information, including floor plan drawings, a list of recent capital expenditures, and current facility design requirements. Capital Management Engineering Limited also provided staff with an interactive Excel-based long-term capital planning tool. These spreadsheets incorporate all data, cost, and timelines and provide staff with a very important tool to use. The spreadsheets consider the impact of various scenarios and their impacts on the overall FCI. Below is a table that kind of outlines what an FCI represents. So the higher the percentage, the worse the condition of the building is considered. To prioritize and establish the needs and scope of each building, staff have ranked the buildings with the higher percentage FCI buildings first. So as you go through the report, you'll see that any of the buildings with a higher ranking are at the top of the charts, and then as they get better, they move down to the bottom. For, I guess, so that I don't provide you guys with an endless amount of spreadsheets, I just provided the first 2020 and 2021 short-term investments for each of the buildings, for each of the 11 buildings. During the on-site investigations, it was identified that the Wingham Museum and the Wingham Public Works Building FCI of 6.4 and 6.43 respectively. This categorizes these buildings as fair condition. Although it is worth noting that the water pollution control plant for Wingham has an FCI of 6.59, which is higher than both of the other buildings, but it is deceptive, as what was recommended to be prioritized was fencing and lighting, but those do not really affect the overall building itself. So as you see, there are a couple of spreadsheets that show the different building conditions, what they are in percentages, as well as just in description, and the financial impacts in table 3 for each of the 11 buildings. There also has not been soft costs incorporated into these financial numbers. So in combination with the strategic plan, staff recommend council prioritize buildings with a higher FCI percentages. This approach will move the FCI to a better service level and encourage discussions regarding the future of certain buildings. As maintenance work is completed, data within the spreadsheets will be updated by staff to reflect appropriate upgrades to the buildings and develop actual financial information versus estimated costs. These spreadsheets will also be able to be uploaded and used in Citywide, the township's asset management software. This will provide council and staff with a useful instrument to make appropriate capital and maintenance decisions in the future. One of the buildings that staff would like to bring to attention is the North Huron Museum. I've taken a few paragraphs from the consultant himself, where he discusses the North Huron Museum. Although the infrastructure deficit has been identified as misleading, the building requires a significant amount of work on the interior, which would need to be developed to meet the needs of the current occupant. This may result in additional cost of renovation not considered in this report. It should also be considered that once a significant amount of capital has been invested, the building may be required to meet current day code. In conclusion, although the building is noted to be a heritage building, the current condition and required investment to To repurpose the building will likely result in it being cost prohibitive. Staff is also recommending that council provide direction at a future meeting for the North Huron Museum. I'm gonna pause there. Does anyone have any questions?
Who would like to start? Trevor?
Thank you, Jamie. I have to admit, this has been, quite enlightening as it relates to where our building conditions are. In all respect, we have done, I think, an admirable job to have, as many of the buildings where we've had the condition assessments to be in good or excellent condition, based on the resources that we've had as a community and in budget constraints and a bunch of other things that we've had. The one question I did have for you, Jamie, was based on the information that we already, so the building condition assessment was being conducted at the same time where we had already indicated we were going to have a roof done on the Wingham Public Works shed as it relates to, and in future, in the next topic, remind you, is that it talks about electrical upgrades. Where would, if those two things were done, where would that building fall, in essence? Would that building then fall into the more of the good condition as it relates to where it falls on the FCI now?
Through your read to Deputy Reed's site. Yes, actually, that's correct. They did already take into account the roof replacement in the BCA for the Wingham shop. If once we remove the electrical and let's say the ceiling for replacement, that would then decrease the FCI ranking because there would be less deferred maintenance over that span, and therefore move the Wingham shop to a fair to good condition.
Anything else? Oh, sorry. Okay, Kevin?
Through your, do we have the ability and the metrics to update this formula as to when these things happen, so we have a current running total all the time, or not coming back in a year and a half and something's been done and these numbers are the same ones we're looking at? Just wondering if there'll be a current schedule of updates to this plan.
To your read to Councilor Faulkner, yes, he provided us all of the spreadsheets for every single one of the buildings. So as we're able to do any replacements to any aspect of those building components, we're gonna be able to update those spreadsheets as well as update them on citywide and have up-to-date condition ratings as well as more accurate, since they won't be just based on estimated costing, it'll be true costs.
Great, it's just that covers our commitment to benchmarking in our mission statement. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Donna, did that make you happy? Good job. Paul, we're talking about the old building across the street with the antiques in it. I know the group has not been meeting. Can you just give us a quick update of because we were talking moving to another building and that, is there, and I understand with COVID we haven't been meeting, but unofficially, have you guys been pondering them out now?
No, we haven't. We're sort of told them to wait. We're going to be listening to our next meeting on the 22nd.
Okay.
Come through.
Did you want to speak to that, Vicki?
Through your worship, just following up with that. So, in terms of an update on the committee and things, obviously because of COVID-19, the meetings ceased for a time being. The group is interested in starting up again. However, in that level of service or service level review, there is a recommendation in there in terms of the operation of the museum and municipalities' role in that. So we actually asked the committee to wait until after that is presented to council on the 22nd. to meet, and we've encouraged them to watch it online as well. They have been given the information or told where to find the information on the website, where to find the report,
Okay.
the KPMG report, and things to look out to go from there. We had, just a little bit further, as we did put out we'll call it meeting feelers to see who would be available for a meeting the following week and things. I've heard back from about half of the group, and some are available, some are not. So at this point, we'll be looking for council's direction at some point after they receive the presentation on Wednesday, or Thursday.
Thank you very much, Vicki. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yes, Reeve, I did want to mention, you know, I think what's happened in the sense of this report, the BCA, and the question has been that that staff are requesting, commitment from council to determine what we're going to do with that building. I think arguably, council has been waiting arguably to see what we're going to do with the contents of that building before we can determine whether we're going to make it surplus, whether we're going to, whatever we're planning on doing with that building. So, you know, I would argue that, you know, I know staff have been, you know, keen on getting direction from council as it relates to what we should be doing with that building, and I would argue council's probably just as keen to give a recommendation about what to do with that building. But arguably that building is not empty. So, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we could even consider putting that thing up for surplus building at all. Like, there is a ton of work in order to get that to a position where we would even consider even selling the building. So I think, you know, as you know, council is aware, you know, we've been going down a path as it relates to, you know, operation of that museum in a privately owned facility. The service delivery review is asking another question, and we want to ensure that council, I think ultimately staff is looking to make sure that council, through the service delivery review, hasn't changed their mind as it relates to the operation of that facility. And I think it's a fair question, it's a fair ask. Whatever council's decision is, you know, staff are required to provide that information to council to ensure that we're making the right decision. And then it goes forward. Then I think we make sure that stands that nothing has changed. New information is always evolving, so I think it's only imperative that we take the information that we were given, the fact that we asked for it, and utilize that and provide that information to the committee as well as council to determine what is the next step. And once that's determined, that is the next step, and we move forward. But in thinking that building is not going to be on the municipal books in the next 2 years, I think we'll be sadly mistaken. I think it's going to be on our books for at least 2 years. I don't foresee it changing, at least in my mind, or even, and you know, it's been a 6 or 7 year discussion. So, you know, at the ultimate thing is there's a lot of work that has to be done, not only by the committee, but this council needs to determine how that's going to work, all shape out before we can get there. So.
Yes, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, Reeve, we're gonna be asking, other than the museum, we're gonna be asking staff to present possible projects, and I don't know how they're gonna do it. Like, yes, this is a baseline, I see it as a baseline, and just because it says, well, the lifespan is done on particular something, it's time to change it. That's not how I operate, and it has to be wore out, leaking, whatever, just like the pumper truck last meeting. There has to be something wrong with it. Like, just because the skin is 25 years old and ready to spend $100 grand, like, I don't know how you're gonna do it. Or there's gonna be huge arguments, and I don't want it to come to that, so I'd almost suggest scenarios or something. And good luck to you. Like, I couldn't do it.
moving forward, that's the beauty of an asset management plan, because we wanna get ourselves to the point where we put away for whatever, $50 a month, every month continually for repair on a building, yeah.
Yes, oh yeah.
But we cannot, as you've said, Chris, we cannot fix those buildings and put away $50 every month. We have to somehow find that perfect match which extends the buildings longer, while at the same time we're saving towards it until we get to a point where, like the fire department used to be where it was, we knew 20 years down the road. Well, he had it for us the other day. We knew ahead of time what they were gonna do, so we need to get all of our, this is a great first step. Thank you very kindly, Jamie. It's a first great step towards asset management, and again, I can't say it enough that sooner or later the upper tier governments are not going to be lending you money higgledy-piggledy. They're gonna say, I wanna see your asset management plan and how much have you saved for that, and we will equal that. And if you say we've got nothing, we're starving to death, they're gonna say, well, then you shouldn't have been somewhere you shouldn't have been. So, Vicky, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanna go back to the museum committee and just further explain on the level of service review and why we've advised the committee to kind of wait till after the meeting. Again, the committee is anxious to get going, but depending on what council's decision may be in terms of our involvement, it will affect the proposal they bring forward in the operations of potential operation of the facility and things. So that's really I know it has nothing to do with the asset management per se, but that's what's going on behind the scenes, is that recommendation coming in the service level, or service delivery review, affects our role with the operation of it, which will affect the recommendation or proposal that's coming from the committee itself.
Okay.
Because at this point, the committee, I believe, is anticipating staff's involvement and the township's involvement in the operation of the museum.
Thank you very kindly. Any other questions? Go ahead, Kevin, and then Paul.
Through your, I noticed on the, these were selected properties to look at. North Huron owns many more properties than what's on here. Were they chosen not to be on here because they were either deemed to be excess, or were new installations, or what was the criteria to get on this list and criteria not to be on this list for management?
Donna?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so as you say, we have 30 buildings. So we went through, I worked with Sean on that, as I said, we've been promoting asset management and trying to get some of these things done. So we had a budget of $50,000, and from estimates that we had, we thought we could only get about 10 or 12 done. So that's why we picked our 10 most used ones that had, the most staff in them, that type of thing. We have a lot of sheds and things like that, but I mean, they're not heavily used or don't have a lot of staff in them, or some of them not used year round. So we have to get started, and so we were just happy to be able to, that council agreed to let us take a first stab at this exercise, and so we really appreciate that, and I hope that the data that we have moving forward is going to be beneficial to us all for sure. So.
Councilor Hefner?
Yes, through you. I see there's a couple of things.
Councilor Hefner?
Yes, through you. I see there's a couple of things on here. There's the fire hall, and then the two waterworks buildings, lagoons. Are they not, in a sense, user pay that we don't, like, is that source of money not coming in a bit different way? The fire hall, sorry, go ahead.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. Yes, of course. So, so with the, like when we asked this fella to do that, those are again two of our big important buildings, but all the repairs and capital upgrades and such for water and sewer is user pay. And so in the and so right now, all their maintenance, et cetera, is all budgeted through user pay, and it will be in the future as well. There's no different in that. It's just as part of the study, we didn't make water and sewer pay for the, say, two 2/11 of the study because it came out of the modernization money.
Yeah, yes, but I guess what I'm coming at, the monies that we're talking here, it's approximately $1.2 million that for our first year we're to try and turn up to fix these buildings up to par. But I just thinking like with the water and the fire hall, won't a lot of that money come in from outside sources, like all us in Wingham here, we use the water, that money's going to come in, so in a sense that's skewing these numbers a little bit, or am I wrong on that? And with Marty, with his budgeting to the ACW, MT and Central Huron, like won't a portion of their monies go towards these costs here? No?
So, do you want, I don't know if you were wanting to answer, but.
Go ahead.
I just was, as it relates to the fire, so as it relates to let's talk about the water first, because the water is a lot easier to discuss. The water information, the buildings, the replacements, all that stuff, all is encompassing of the water rates that we establish.
Mhm.
So the financial plan that was developed by BM Ross, that we just talked about increasing our water rates some of those are relating into that. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Heffer, is that we are saving for these replacements, and we have reserves currently in place to solve some of these issues. But again, as you've seen during our financial plan, our financial review of water, it's not enough. We're not pulling in enough reserves to fully replace every piece of equipment in the water and sewer. But that is intention, is that part of the water and sewer rates include capital upgrades and capital replacement, because that's what you're paying for when you have the capital reserve on your water bill. That's what happens in those there. That's what you're paying for, are these types of capital upgrades every year. The argument of this is that when these replacements need to be, these are really more to tell us when we need the money, not necessarily how we're going to get the money. These are telling us when we need the money so that we can ensure that our financial plan plays out to that card and make sure that we have those funds available. As it relates to the fire hall, that's a discussion with our agreements. That's an actual fire agreement discussion. As Reed Bailey has indicated a number of times, we have to ensure that we have these fire halls and the equipment and the apparatuses and all that stuff. If they want a part of our agreement, they want us to service them, then it needs to be understanding that you're paying for some of the building, you're paying for some of the equipment. Marty would be better the one to answer that if it's part of the agreement today, but arguably you're absolutely correct. That part of that capital reserve that we get from those ACW, Morris Turnberry, and that of the $100,000, that's what that is intention. But as you found out last month, it doesn't take long to eat up a reserve in the fire department budget pretty quickly when you need a tanker at $500,000 or $600,000. So you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Taxation is in those particular instances is not going to result in increased taxation to solve these problems. Those are user pay systems. The water or the fire is potentially a taxation issue, depending on how the agreement lines up.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. 7.4.2, that the Council of Township of North Huron hereby receives the report from the Director of Public Works and Facilities dated October 19th, 2020, regarding the Wingham Public Works Building electrical upgrades for information. And further, the Council authorizes staff to proceed with the completing electrical upgrades and replacement of the ceiling in the office area of the Wingham Public Works Building at an estimated cost of $38,675. And further, that the Council authorizes the Treasurer to transfer $38,675 from reserves to complete this project. Do I have a mover?
So move.
I have Trevor, I have Paul seconding. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. There's no fire department, no building department, no child care department reports. Unless I missed a page, we're on to,
Here's CAO 7.8.1.
oh, sorry, I missed a page. 7.8.1, the CEO, that the council of the Township of North Huron hereby enters into an agreement with the Asabo Bayfield Conservation Authority for implementing of Part 4 of the Clean Water Act. And further, the council directs staff to prepare a bylaw for the November 2nd, 2020 regular meeting, which authorizes the reeve and the clerk to sign on behalf of the Asabo Bayfield Conservation Authority for the delivery of services under the Clean Water Act. And further, that council directs staff to incorporate $7,205.21 into the draft 2021 budget for Part 4 Clean Water Act services. Dwayne, do you mind speaking to this? Oh, sir, first of all, I'm gonna get a mover and a seconder. I have Chris, and I have Paul. Sorry, Dwayne, go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. So under the Clean Water Act, municipalities are responsible for the enforcement of source protection plans. And the Act indicates that municipalities can delegate that authority by, with either a Board of Health, a Planning Board, or a Source Protection Authority. The Asabo Bayfield Conservation Authority and the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority serve as source water protection authorities, and they do so through the Asabo Bayfield Maitland Source Protection Region. And through regulation, that region is comprised of 8 municipalities, which are outlined in your report, North Huron being one of those 8 municipalities. So back in 2017, we entered into an agreement for the delivery of that service, and all 8 municipalities entered into that agreement, and that agreement expires on December 31st of this year. So the report recommends that we renew the agreement, and as well we put money into our draft 2021 budget for the continuation of that agreement. One key thing to note though, and attached to the report is a memo dated October the 6th. And the purpose of attaching the memo is to bring to council's attention that the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks is proposing some updates to the technical rules for assessing source water protection vulnerability as well as risks under the Clean Water Act. And when you look at that, the proposed changes do have impacts on us, and not just on us and the other 7 municipalities that are part of our region. So bearing that in mind, those impacts, and they're detailed in your report, but essentially as a result of the changes, some of the risk management plans that we currently have with property owners, we may have to revise them, some of them, we may have to put new ones into place, and there may be some that we currently have that we no longer need to have. And that particular regulation or those proposed changes, if they were to be approved, and the expectation is that they will be approved by mid-2021, once those changes are approved by the province, then they have to go through the Source Water Protection Committee. The committee then reviews and amends their policies and sends them to the province for approval. So it's expected that those policies to implement those new regulations would come into place in 2023. So in light of these anticipated changes that are coming down the pipeline, in terms of our contribution, you'll see in the agreement is for the Asabo Bayfield Conservation Authority to provide the service to us. It's $7,205.21 for 2021 and 2022, but it's in 2023, because of the proposed changes coming down from the province, the contribution is proposed to increase to $12,084.21. But if you look at the memo that was attached, it's not just our contribution that would be going up in 2023. All 8 municipalities are seeing an increase in 2023. So we're not being singled out or treated any differently than any of the other 8 municipalities. thing to bear in mind is that those figures that, 7,000 for year 1 and year 2 and the 12,000 for year 3 is all based on all 8 municipalities signing on to the agreement, as has been done in 2017. And indications, all local councils are currently dealing with it. From a staff's level, indications are that the municipalities will all be signing on. But in the event that there was a municipality that did not sign on, then the Conservation Authority would have to go back and do some recalculating that would essentially result in an increase to that contribution for year 1, year 2, and ultimately year 3. So again, the staff recommendation is that we renew the agreement for the source water protection, Saddle Bayfield and Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, to continue to providing that service, being the delivery of risk management services under Section 4 of the Clean Water Act, and again, that we incorporate the $7,205 into the draft 21 budget.
Questions or comments? Kevin?
Through your, the third year, that 12,000 of the increase into our portion to pay into that will be on the first year of a new council year, and I'm just wondering why they wouldn't have projected an increase on year 1 and year 2 to kind of lessen the blow of year 3 in this agreement. That it's a large, almost 70% increase for 1 year to the next. There seemed to be a lot of money for that 1 year for what they have to do. I thought they would have been putting it at $9,000 for everyone for the first 2 years, and maybe $9,000 the third year, leveling everything out rather than hitting a new council with a 70% increase in something that we agreed to, and putting it onto another council, in case there's some of us that aren't here. I was just wondering why they hadn't thought of projecting that forward.
I can't speak exactly to in terms of the reasoning behind it, but I think partly is in terms of the year 3 is on the understanding or expectation that the province is moving forward with those legislative changes. And it's anticipate those legislative changes would be in 2023. Essentially, in terms of spreading it over 3 years, that's certainly something that can be discussed. But essentially, you might be paying for something that you might end up not needing, or you might not need to the same extent in 2023. But
do we get to does this come back to council every year then for that each? This is they're asking for a 4-year agreement or a 3-year agreement.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Essentially, it's for a 3-year agreement. But certainly, my thought would be that if the province changed and did something differently, then I would suggest that they're gonna come back to us, and not just us, to all 8 municipalities, and ask for a change to the agreement, and the change could be up or down, depending on what the actual legislative changes. This is, for lack of a better word, best estimate, in terms of they're projecting out that if the province proceeds with all these changes, here's what we anticipate the impact's going to be on each of the 8 municipalities, and to compensate for that, increasing in that year 3. But if the province changes their minds, and one, for example, is salt, so if they change if the province changes, that will change how many risk management plans that may be affected in our municipality. But going back to your earlier point, I can certainly take the comment and the suggestion back, and it would not just be us, it would be the other 7 municipalities would have to be on board with that.
So in order for you to take that back, we would not pass this motion now?
Well, no, the motion basically says to bring back the bylaw at the November 2nd meeting. So we're not asking for council to pass the bylaw at tonight's meeting.
Okay, just information.
This is a report, but certainly if we want to, if you wish, I can take that back, and then I'll take that back to the chair of the committee or the authority, and they can then have that conversation, and we can see them by November 2nd, what comes back to council if you wish.
Is council in agreement with that? Oh, Chris, go ahead.
Question, it's the dark side of me asking this question. I'm thinking of a map. Is there anybody missing? Has anybody backed out in the past?
No, I mean, so the Conservation Authority has provided the services 2015, and the first agreement was signed in 2017, and all 8 municipalities
Okay.
signed on. I have no reason to think that one of the 8 is not going to sign on, but,
You never know.
I mean, I can't, but again, by November 2nd, when we bring the bylaw back to council, all the municipalities are currently considering this agreement within the next couple of weeks. So the expectation or anticipation is that by November 2nd, if there is a municipality that's going to opt out, we'll have some indication before we actually bring it back for council.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, Rick. Do we have a similar request and contract with Maitland Valley Conservation on this? Is that your same thing?
They're all one.
Oh, they're all one. They're all
Yeah.
okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, I was talking to Ms. McDonald that's involved with this, and she said, as our CEO said, the salt is the big issue right now. And that's what they're very concerned about for it getting into water and whatnot. So may I ask a question through to our,
You may.
I'm just wondering, the new building shed that's going on down, the new office, is it far enough away? That's all been taken into consideration, being far enough away from any wellheads down there?
Through your read, as far as I'm under the understanding, yeah, all that was
Okay,
dealt with prior to, but I can look into it further.
thank you.
So you'll take that back, David, how's that, Rusty?
Reeve, just a question on, and maybe to you, Dwayne, is the risk management processes need to be reviewed in the source water protection area? I know we have signs up that says you're entering a source water protection area. Is that the risk mitigation factor that tops into this, or is it completely every aspect of the municipality's water, source water protection, in the sense that these regulations that the government may change, is that going to impact only those areas, or is it going to impact the services of the entire municipality? I think I'm not sure why. I'm trying to understand the signage of you're entering a source water protection area and mapping it to this committee, because I'm assuming that's what their part of their committee is understanding that source water protection in all of these municipalities. Is that am I correct in that assumption or no?
Yeah, through your worship, I mean, my understanding is that the source water protection areas are not changing, but it's in terms of the risk management plans within those areas. So right now, so as you get out, the farther you get out, right, then there's I'll call it less mitigating. There's less potential of contamination of your source water protection the farther you get out from it. But in light of the proposed changes that the province is making, they're saying, and I can't say specifically, but just to illustrate, that, we said that if you were in, there's zones, okay?
Mhm.
So you have your source water, and then you have your zone 1. And let's say, that salt is a major concern there, but when you go out, salt's less of a concern in your zone 2. But based on the proposed legislative changes, the province, may be saying in that zone 2 where we said salt was not a concern, now it is a concern. And so now that means that those people in zone 2 now have to do new management, or either new, revised, the risk management plans they had
It's different.
may not be relevant anymore, and so they have to get rid of what they had, and they have to do a whole new risk management plan. And so the Oswego Bayfield Conservation Authority Source Protection staff work with those property owners to get their risk management plans into compliance with the policies, that the Source Water Protection Committee has in place.
Thank you very much for the clarity.
Anyone else? Not seeing anybody else, I call the motion, all in favor? Carries. 7.8.2, before I read it and ask for a mover and seconder, we have two names on the, up here for this position, but my understanding is we only need one, so I'm gonna turn to my clerk and ask him how I should handle that.
Through your worship, so if both councillors are interested, what we would do is conduct it similar to election and ask for one, for council to put one name forward, and then if that vote carries, then that person would get the position. If it didn't carry, then we'd move on to the next name, and that would either be carried or defeated as well. However, for some context purposes, I think that you'd want the CAO to kind of speak to this before conducting a vote.
I turned to the wrong guy. See, that's fine. So I will ask you how we should handle them with the two. Same question, so how do we decide, like,
I just
how do we
have
do
to
the vote?
speak to the report first.
Oh, okay, go ahead,
Yeah.
go for it.
Okay, so I'll speak to the report first, and then, so building on my earlier report, there's a Source Water Protection Committee, and that committee is comprised of representatives of what we call groups. North Huron is part of the central group, and the central group is the three municipalities of Morris, Turnberry, Huron East, and North Huron. So those three municipalities appoint a representative to sit on the Source Water Protection Committee, and the committee then develops the policies that I referred to earlier, and those policies are developed by that committee and then forwarded to the province for approval. And developing those policies, they have to comply with provincial legislation. Our representative on that committee has been David Blaney. David is a former councillor for the municipality of Huron East. He has held that position on that committee since 2011. He was actually one of the founding committee members on that. So he served a number of years sitting on that committee. For personal reasons, Mr. Blaney has resigned as the representative of the Central Working Group, effective the end of September. So right now, we don't have representation sitting on that committee. In talking to my colleagues in Huron East and Morris Turnberry, my counterparts have spoken with their respective councils to find out whether or not there's any sitting member of council in their municipalities interested in filling that vacancy. Huron East and Morris Turnberry has indicated they have no sitting members of council interested in filling the vacancy. In terms of with our council, we do have, as been indicated, 2 councillors who are interested in filling the vacancy. Again, I've spoken with my counterparts, and they were very appreciative that we have interest representation from our committee. They're quite looking forward to hearing who we decide we'd like to be the representative, and then that will then be forwarded to Huron East and Morris Turnberry, with the understanding that they will then appoint that individual as well to be their representative. So as been indicated, Councillor Heffer and Councillor McBurney have both expressed an interest in sitting as a representative on that committee. And so in terms of to fill the vacancy, it's recommended that one of those 2 individuals be appointed as municipal representative, and then that appointment then gets forwarded to Huron East and Morris Turnberry for similar appointment.
So would somebody like to nominate somebody? Go ahead, Trevor.
Before I do that, Reeve, I just want to make a comment. I find it interesting that no other council, whether it be Morris Turnberry or Central or Huron East, have any interest in this committee. It begs the question: why do we have 2 and they have none? But I guess my question, that's really more of a comment, as a sense of just I'm surprised that they don't seem to be putting a lot of emphasis on this committee. And I ultimately believe it is a very valuable committee as it relates to you talk about source water protection. So I commend both, Councillor Heffer and Councillor McBurney, as it relates to their wanting to be involved. I guess my comment before I make a recommendation, have Councillor McBurney and, cause I have no idea when the meetings are, how often they are, how many they're scheduled, like, do we have an understanding of that the workload that either the both of you would undertake under this committee is not going to impact significantly to your, I would argue, your work-life balance as it relates? I ask that because I know how it's to be on multiple committees and volunteer, and I just want to make sure that, I'm assuming you're comfortable and you've understood the cause, but I just want to, I guess, clarity for myself, Reeve, if Councillor McBurney and Councillor Heffer could explain that if they understood that, what those roles are, because I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah. So if we want to start with Councillor Heffer, and then we'll have Councillor McBurney speak.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Yes, fellow councillors. I was talking to Ms. McDonald and asked her some questions, and she said there's going to be a lot of reading, but they have meetings. Now you're going to think I'm wrong, or I think 3 times a year and whatnot. That's how they do it. And other than that, and she just said the main thing right now is the salt issue that's coming up, as our CEO alluded to that. So she said a lot of reading, and so I guess
Thank you,
that's all
Paul.
I can say to that.
Yep, thank you, Paul. Rick?
Yes, through you, Reeve. I was wondering the same thing that Deputy Reeve Sipe said about why others aren't stepping forward. Made me wonder in regards to this position, but I think I can fit it in my schedule.
Thank you, gentlemen. Go
Would
ahead.
the only answer be that Mr. Blaney came from more than neck of the woods and they thought, maybe give us a chance? I don't know.
Through your worship, so, I mean, I'm not speaking for Huron East Council, but I do know that the CAO indicated that Huron East has held the position since 2011. So the comment was made that Huron East is quite open to one of the other 2 councils filling that seat. I can't speak to Morris Turnberry, but that was one of the comments from the CAO in Huron East. So when they heard, it was indicated to the CAO in Huron East and CAO in Morris Turnberry that there was interest on the part of our council in terms of the Huron East. That certainly may have been a factor.
Thank you. Somebody like to make a nomination? Trevor?
I'll nominate that Councillor Heffer be the representative from North Huron Council.
Do I need a second?
Yeah, so through your worship. So what we'll do is, so there's the draft motion there that was developed in the CAO staff report. So what we do is basically we would Trevor's make an amendment to that motion. Basically we'd read it as if whoever is being appointed, and then if that either that passes or that fails, and then we move on to the next one with a similar approach.
Okay, so do we have a seconder? Okay.
Who do you have?
Kevin? So, Kevin? And,
So do you want me to read the?
yeah, go ahead.
So the motion on the floor is that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the CAO report dated October 19th, 2020 regarding an appointment to the Maitland Source Water Protection Authority Board, and further that Council hereby appoints Councillor Heffer as the municipal representative for the central grouping on the Maitland Source Water Protection Authority Board for the remainder of the 2019 to 2022 term of Council, and further that Council directs staff to prepare and send a letter to the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority and the municipalities in the central grouping indicating the same, and further that Council amends bylaw number 25, 2019, being the committee appointment bylaw, to include the appointment of Councillor Heffer as North Huron's representation on the Source Water Protection Authority Board, And further, that staff be directed to prepare and send a letter of thanks to David Blaney for his years of service representing North Huron on the Maitland Source Water Protection Authority Board.
So I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Carries. And thank you very much, Rick, for stepping up to the plate too. And Paul, you're off and running. Okay.
Not yet. Not yet. Still needs approval from 2 other councils.
Okay, we're gonna slip down to number 8 now. 8.1, letter from the municipality of Morris Turnberry, service connection request. This is the green request coming in for the second time. Anybody want to speak to this? Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, like we're dealing with this letter from their CEO, newspaper articles, different emails and stuff, and it's hard to get your head around all the information where it came from, and I'd like to suggest that, you know, the third of their CA, of Morris Turnberry CEO, third paragraph says that someone from North Huron gave permission.
I'm going to speak to that.
And for me, that's the catalyst to everything else for the discussion. You know, if permission was indeed given, okay, where'd that come from? Like, council didn't give it, so it's just stuff I need to get my head wrapped around. And then, you know, you know, if permission was given, what do you do? Take it back? How do you deal with it? So we do have there's a conversation ahead, that's for sure. Yeah, I'd like us to start at that point, though.
How about I start right at that point
Yeah.
then, because I was involved in this from before the permission was asked. So I did a little jotting down today, and I'm going to read it. In the Blythe Citizen paper, there was an article that Morris Turnberry supported Greens Connections. I am very disappointed in the way our staff was talked about, treated in our council. I'm not happy at all. Here's why. Mr. Hallam, CAO of Morris Turnberry, stated North Huron Public Works staff advised Mr. Green to begin installing services from the temporary office to connect to the North Huron municipal water. This is absolutely incorrect. On Friday, June 26th, I received a call from our Works Department director stating that one of our employees was driving by Greens and there was a Cliffs plumbing truck digging a trench between the house and the road. So Sean called and asked me if he had missed some council approval about hookups. No. And he went out and put a stop to the dig. Sean was informed by Cliffs that they'd be back on Monday, so this is Friday, on Monday, to finish the job, but that didn't take place. On Monday the 30th at 9:55, I received an email from Sean stating that Mr. Green had filled out the forms for the hookup. So this is after they dug the hole, very clearly after they dug the hole. And he filled out the forms and he understood that no hookup could be approved without North Huron approving it. Could take place without North Huron approving it. In the same email, Sean also stated that Trevor Hamill had just tried to get Sean to move forward with the connection. Morris Turnberry knows the request has to go before the Council of North Huron, who owns the services. If the pipes freeze, it's the responsibility of Morris Turnberry and the Greens, as North Huron denied the connection, till a deal can be made with Morris Turnberry. I did speak with Kevin Green about this situation the first week of July, and he and I agreed that if Morris Turnberry and North Huron could strike a deal before freezing temperatures 6 months down the road. The last correspondence from Morris Turnberry was on June 15th. July, June, July, August, September, October. Okay, that was the last correspondence. So, and let us know, so the last correspondence from Morris Turnberry was on, and they let us know how they felt. You could say it was a kind of letter you'd send to somebody, somebody's lawyer if you're going through a divorce. Couldn't be nasty, and it's over with. So there's no reason to believe that the negotiations are going to continue. Let's be honest to Kevin. And this is the Reeves feelings. Trevor Hamill did reach out to Dwayne Evans, our CEO, and asked to resume negotiations. And we sent a letter on September 23rd with our offer that they already had and asked for feedback, counter offer, or something. North Huron received a hookup request for greens. That's what we're going to talk about. Mr. Green, I am sorry, but your township is not negotiating. Therefore, there will never be a deal this way. You can't have a deal. Mr. Hamill, and I would like council's permission to get this. Mr. Hamill, can you provide me with your accusations of misconduct by the North Huron staff? Because I will not tolerate anybody talking about my staff like that. He can run Morris Turnberry. If he has a problem, Jamie can come to me, or he can go to Dwayne, but you don't say those kind of things in public. Because I think it's bullshit, and you can tell I'm not happy about it. Morris Turnberry Council, even after all this, we're going to leave the door open for negotiations if you still want hookups. Mr. Green, it's being held up by Morris Turnberry as North Huron waits for a reasonable, business-minded answer or conversation. I hope everybody understands the gravity of what just happened. Okay, I'm going to open it back up to council. You all know how I feel now. By the way, since 2014 when I was on council before, here's the agreements that were made by different municipalities around us. I think you guys all have one of these somewhere. I'm sure I gave you one. Everybody made a decision to work together except Hanover and I think it was West Grey. So if you go to Hanover, it's bustling. So Wingham, don't worry, we'll be bustling if we can't make a deal. But you don't see it bustling on the side of West Grey. It's on the other side of Hanover, all around but there. But if that's the deal they want to make, we're not inventing the wheel. They have all these choices. I've handed to them, and they've came back with, we don't want to make a deal. They've been clear from day one, they don't want to make a deal. So with council's permission, I would like Dwayne to get the answer for me for those questions. Now I'm going to open it up to council. Anyone else like to speak? Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, Reeve. It doesn't come as a surprise, at least to me. The way this negotiation's gone, it's the way they've gone for 15, 20 years, so it's, there's only so many times you can look in the horse's mouth to check his teeth at a sale when you realize the same horse is coming back with bad teeth. It's, unfortunately, it's nothing out of the ordinary. Unfortunately, I hope the negotiations can continue and come to some kind of an agreement, but yelling into an empty box just doesn't do anything. So.
Go ahead, Trevor.
The one thing that I think we all have to, as I have read this request probably 10 times, everything on this request has nothing to do with North Huron. Nothing to do with us at all. They're concerned about open pipes freezing. Those pipes are in Morris Turnberry. They're not in North Huron. None of this issue is if you would have the conversation has been, if you would have requested for a connection and received the connection, you would have begun to dig. Not dig and then ask for the connection, and then when your hole is dug, you don't have a connection, you come to the municipality who denied you the access and say, well, you denied us access, you need to help us fill in our hole. Like, part of my, I think ultimately is if Morris Turnberry wants to support Green's issues with hazards on their lines about, they have equipment. They have equipment no different than North Huron does. If you have a concern, if you think there's a concern about freezing pipes in Morris Turnberry, well, fill them in. And then if we have an agreement, help them out. Dig it back up. You have the equipment. It's not as if we have the only equipment in Huron County to do that type of work. So, to me, it really resonates in the discussion about, we worry about us, they worry about them as it relates to Morris Turnberry. everything with regards to Green's Meat Market in this house or this property that needs the connection or wants the connection is in Morris Turnberry. Morris Turnberry understands council's direction, and I don't think, and I haven't heard anybody say we're looking to change our direction. I know I'm not. We suggested we will connect you if we have an agreement. Nobody in this council is dictating otherwise, from what I'm hearing. And my concern has always been, is it's fine to come to us and say they want a request and they want this and they want that. But we're not getting anything reciprocated. So, you know, I feel for, I want to be clear. I feel for Green's Meat Market and the Greens in the sense that they're in the middle of a glorified discussion between two municipalities. So I have somewhat a little bit of a sympathy that they're dealing with and how, you know, they've got enough on their plate to have to deal with rather than this problem. But in reality, that's not, like, Green's Meat Market and John Green or Kevin Green really have nothing to talk about with North Huron because it's not North Huron's problem. We own the service. They're looking to connect. Morris Turnberry wants to connect to us. They don't want to have an agreement. We've made that, I don't know how much more clear we can be in the sense that you don't need to continue asking the question when we've already told you there'll be no new connections until you have an agreement. So arguably, to me, it continues the same way. Morris Turnberry, if you want to help out your constituent on their issues, by all means, it's your choice whether you want to help them or not. Because I can tell you right now, if these requests were coming to North Huron from North Huron residents, and it was the other way around, I would be telling everybody right now on council, I would be saying I'd be putting a motion on to help them and fill in their hole. They've had enough problems as it is. Let's help them out by filling in their hole and helping them solve some of these problems. Not go to another municipality and say, oh, by the way, because we've ignited these problems, you need to solve our problem by giving them a connection. That's how they're trying to solve the problem. They're utilizing an issue, a concern, a disaster as leverage. And I think it's not fair. It's not fair for this council to have to deal with it. It's definitely not fair, in my mind, for Green's Meat Market to be stuck in the middle of a discussion that they should never be involved in at all. So, as I said, this is a Morris Turnberry issue. North Huron has given direction to Morris Turnberry and staff that says no new connections until we have an agreement. I am not changing my level on feeling of that discussion. So unless that is going to change, my suggestion is staff reiterate back to North Huron or Morris Turnberry Council that says, again, no new connections until an agreement is reached. Then the ball is again in Morris Turnberry's court to decide whether they want it, how bad do they want an agreement. Because right now it doesn't sound like they really want an agreement. They want to use the media and they want to use other things to make us look like the bad guy. And we're not. We really are not. We're trying to make sure that we have what North Huron residents have, and if you want to connect, great. We're more than happy to help you connect, but you have to have an agreement to do that.
Thank you, Trevor. Christopher?
Yeah, Reeve, you mentioned, Trevor, that this does not include us, but there's an accusation in here, so it does include us, and it's been noted by the Reeve that that's false.
Here's the emails if you want to read them.
Oh,
I back everything with
I'm okay, it's okay. I'm saying you back the story up that it did not happen. So, the history of where Kevin started doing it, or was it false pretenses, whatever. Like, we all want them to be hooked up, everybody to be hooked up.
Yeah.
We want this agreement settled so there can be development, and we want Greens to get going again. There's no two ways about it, but it can't be done this way. And I would suggest that if they want to trench from the house or the new building to the curb, but 3 feet away, 5 feet away, doesn't matter, but get to it in direction, then they can, because they've got the excavator, they got the equipment there, then backfill it, find out the right piping, backfill it, and have a blind end. Then it waits till the agreement happens. So the work is done, and they have to fill in where the curb is, because that shouldn't have happened. So then therefore nothing should freeze for our equipment. But that's all I can suggest at this point. And somebody's in trouble here. It shouldn't have happened. And it doesn't help for our negotiation, that's for sure. And it's a sad thing, because we want Greens to get going again, and we want it all working. So I sure hope Morris Turnberry takes this to heart and comes back and starts talking to us. Because there's people's futures involved, and it's just not fair to them. But that's what I would suggest to Greens. Trench it in, do right to where they need to be, but separate, and then there's no hazards. But fill in where our hub is. Then there's no freezing, and it's safe. So then the work's done. Then when the agreement's done, then they can just come in with a little backhoe, dig out that 4 feet, hook up things, and Bob's your uncle. That's my only suggestion at this point.
Go ahead, Kevin.
For you, Reeve, just a rebuttal on that. If staff hadn't went by on Friday, that already would have been done, hooked up.
Then there would have been more trouble.
So if you found someone taking cattle to your barn just because they didn't get them to market them later, they already tried to steal your cattle once. It's just an unfortunate situation with reckless abandonment for the letter of the law as far as municipalities getting together in contracts, and I just don't see rewarding bad behavior with a good return. So I don't see the likelihood of me voting on allowing them to they've already got the piping out there now. So
It's not hooked up physically though, as far as I know.
just because somebody came along.
I know, thank goodness for that, because then trouble would be. I mean, what we're saying
It's not
is
good
it's
faith. I'm just saying
not
it's not
much
good faith.
different. It's just
I don't
said
see,
differently, but it says the same thing.
I don't see you offering good faith on bad faith.
Well, I also want, I try to forgive, I try to move forward. And that's what I want, is a hope that we as council can deal with. Okay, that happened, that was crap, shouldn't have happened. Now, let's get in discussions.
So I'm gonna follow that up with Morris Turnberry needs to come to the table if they're interested. If they're not, I don't see spending Mr. Green's money putting the hook up there. He could be 80 years old before agreement's ever, because there's only one of us at the table. And no, I agree. No, we haven't passed a motion on the floor. There will be no hookups until there's an agreement. Go ahead, Kevin.
Let's be certain, like, we've already denied one hookup.
Yeah.
So allowing this hookup to go forward in any form,
It sets a precedence.
So that's
we've
a
already set a
lawsuit.
precedent, we've already set a precedent, this is theft. It's no, it's the answer about it, it's theft of public property, owned by North Huron, by a hostile neighbor. I can't see it being any other way. No asking for permission, it's, sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, but they've already been told what permission was gonna be like. make it.
Yeah, to follow up with that, we have no idea who gave permission, who asked, what was going on, involvement of everyone. We don't, you know, we don't really, we're not interested in that. We're interested in making a deal with Morris Turnberry or moving on, to my point of view. But yeah, there's no sense, having the hookup, because what's happening right now is there's no agreement, and there's only been 3-4 meetings, and it's 2 years. So all they're doing is running the clock out, because I was clear that I wanted to make good, sensible deals as my term on council. And I guess if they can run that clock 2 more years, maybe the next guy will give them everything free. But my council may decide to go against me, but I am not interested in patching anything, patchwork. I want a good 10-20 year deal. Go ahead, Trevor.
I think what, you know, as a follow-up too, is from your discussion, Reeve, as you started, you were, you know, very passionate about the discussion about what our staff have and haven't done. You know, and I think ultimately we need to get, you know, Councillor Palmer has made reference to that as in this letter, that they were given access. They were given approval to do something. You have asked the question. I think ultimately, in my mind, that's a question that we need answered. And I think from Morris Turnberry and staff to request that information as it relates to this issue, you know, I think is the right answer. I think it's the right question to ask. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a combative discussion. It just needs to be, you're saying you got approval. Here's the documentation that says that we got. Where are we wrong? Where is the disconnect? And then the discussion can be. I think this is a conversation about, you know, staff things and staff resources and all that stuff. You know, as where are we wrong in this sense about what we believe as the tasks that oriented during those days. I think that's the fact of the matter is, we don't see it the same as they do. You know, answering the questions would help, you know, I think would help, you know, in essence would help Dwayne facilitate what resort or what went on or what didn't go on, you know, obviously, and then go from there. But you know, I still say, you know, I agree that, you know, we still have to. We have denied requests before, and I'm telling you, we will deny more requests until we get an agreement. And until this council wants to change that, that's the motion on the floor. And until a motion comes back from somebody in council who wants to change that's where we're at. So I don't see us changing that discussion right now.
Thank you, Trevor. Any other conversations before we move on? Not seeing any?
Were you planning on passing a motion there, or?
No, I just
There's
give
been
direction.
some discussion, so okay, because I know someone had mentioned whether direct staff to reiterate to Morris Turnberry, so whether you want to put that in a motion or if Dwayne has enough direction.
What do you feel comfortable with, Dwayne?
Well, unless council changes, I think what we've heard tonight, there's been no motion to reconsider the previous motion, which is to defer hookups until an agreement is reached. And I think what we're hearing is that council maintains that position. So based on the previous motion, we'll respond to this correspondence.
Do we need a motion to find out if indeed somebody from our township gave permission or not, or would you just do it on your own?
I don't think.
I know.
Sorry, Reeve.
Sorry.
Sorry, no.
It's important.
It is important, and I think that's operational. Like that.
Yeah.
That's something that's in a letter, correspondence to Dwayne, that he in essence needs to follow up on with no real direction from us. And we don't have to give him direction to do that. That's, in all honesty, that's
fine.
his responsibility, I think, to do that.
Yeah.
Based on the acquisition that was done.
Okay, everyone? Thank you very kindly. So the other items in there are the Wingamore Police Services Board. Trevor, did you want to speak to that one?
Really, I just wanted to make note, you know, there has been, you know, we are just gonna have our second meeting tomorrow night as it relates to the Police Services Board. More of a question, just if people had questions as it relates to this report. I did want to follow up as it relates to, there has been a number of questions as it relates to our contract. There was a reconciliation that was provided to us by the OPP as it relates to the reconciliation of our, Donna, just rephrase me if I misquote here, but I believe it was our last 2000 and, what year are we in now, 2018? I think it was that year where we've got a reconciliation, and I believe it was 100 and something thousand that they reduced from what our contract was on our reconciliation. I'm quoting numbers out of my head, but I believe there was a reconciliation provided to the municipality. So to say, to answer the question that has come to this council number of times is there a reconciliation done as it relates to the contract? There is. So I've seen it. I know the finance department has probably seen it as well. It probably would not hurt, as I'm looking at Donna, is to bring that reconciliation to the budget deliberation, just so council members can see that, because I know it came to me directly. Probably maybe it came to the Reeve as well as the director of finance. So I just wanted to let council know that is something that is continually happening as it relates to the reconciliation of our contract, even though we're not under section 5.1 or anything like that. Okay? So if there was anything other reason, that was really more the question of the report that I could potentially, or me or Rick could take to the board meeting tomorrow. Would be more than happy to get those questions answered by the deputy, the detachment commander, or anybody on the board. Questions as relates to that meeting.
Any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. That the Council Township of North Huron hereby accepts the OPP Detachment Commander's Report, Wing Award for the months of August and September for information purposes. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, a seconder. Kevin? Questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the motion. All in favor? Carries. Okay, Reeves Activity Report. I think I already said enough, but I'll say a few more things. I just want to say the crosswalk in Blythe's looking pretty good. It's coming along pretty good. It should slow traffic down. I hope to see lots of fancy flashing lights there to slow everybody down. They're moving along with that one. I put forward Chris's information for the AG4 for the county, and I'm going to let Chris to speak to that. I want to thank you very much for the information you gave me. I believe that has been tossed around at county for 6 or 7 years now, and Chris stepped forward and gave me some information which I sent out to all the other mayors and reeves that sit on the county, and we took that one off the book. It will no longer be talked about, but I'm going to let Chris talk to that one. Thank you, Chris. I wrote down here unbelievable amount of time of A2A, but I already talked about that. The EDRC, we talked about with the Economic Development Recovery Team. We talked about one of the big issues is we want to get better service for East Wawanosh, and we've had, I think I might have talked about this one already. We have had a meeting with the two servicers, and the politicians from Upper Tiers came to visit with us and help us along, and there was a few other people involved in it. I just want to say that one of the services reached out to me and said, Bernie, I will work with you to get better service in East Wawanosh. You tell me where it has to be and we'll see what we can do. Again, meetings, talkings to people, you can move things forward. Especially if you have proper meetings, like not Tim Horton coffee meetings. So anything that's going on, guys, you want help, but don't be afraid to reach out, because we can find somebody who can help us. So I'm really hopeful that we're gonna, before a year's up, we'll have everybody in East Wawanosh taken care of too. And Halloween. Halloween's coming. The kids are going to be out. I hope for everybody's sake they're safe. I hope they keep their distance. I want them to enjoy themselves. It's like Christmas. I mean, there's only certain things that come along that you will remember your entire life, the fun and sometimes not so much fun. But I hope we have a good, safe Halloween. We already talked about Memorial Day, and unfortunately it's not going to be fun, but let's hope the kids enjoy themselves and it doesn't bring on anything none of us want to deal with. Having said that, that's it for me. Council member reports, verbal or written updates from members who sit on boards or committees. I don't think there's too many of them going yet. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, we had a virtual Alice Munro meeting, and they're going to be having it in person and also virtual, like they're going to be playing both. And with the author readings, it can come in cheaper doing it virtual, but there's something about having the person up here too, a little bit of it. So they're playing that. They're going to look at the authors in late November, start booking them. The short stories start again, start of the new year, and it was way up this past year, so it is good. With the virtual, they get a lot more people watching what's going on, and just vice versa, people around like going down the city to see some things, if they can watch on virtual, they'll go for it. And another thing they're trying to do, they're working with Denise Lockey, and they're trying to do, make up a pamphlet to go into promoting this area for, it's where she was born, her birthplace, and they want to get it out into all the libraries, sorry, in Huron County, because people are asking where it is. So again, it's a promo for tourism in this area that they're trying to come up on. And they're soon to have that done, they're putting the pictures together, so, yeah, that's it, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, two points, one big, one little. The Belgrave Arena, the board had, instead of having the foul supper, customary, 1,000 people fed in 5 minutes type of thing, they had takeout, chicken takeout, and I've eaten my chicken and my tarts in the freezer, so it's been good. They sold out, and I understand the Columbus Center has had different events, takeout events, so I'm happy that these groups are having a little bit of cash flow, so increased cash flow, so that's good. Now the other one, Reeve Bailey mentioned, this was a big move, and it's been kicked around for several years, like he said, and it just hasn't been handled right. There's been a lot of delegations coming and going, and there's 1,900, okay, back up. It's all about AG4 zoning, so that's under 10 acres, a little patch of heaven, and the county planning department is concerned about, well, there was a legal action, we know where that was, and not legal, it was legal issues, and it didn't go well for really both parties, and they're afraid of that happening again. And the reason it didn't go well is because county planning didn't do their due diligence, and they failed to see that there's 5 provincial acts that tell them they can't do it. The Nutrient Management Act being the strongest one. You cannot stop, you can't affect the number of animals on a lot, you just can't. Province says so. So anyways, so they've been trying to skirt around that. This would be the planning. First of all, they came up with, these are surplus residences too, because they kind of fall into that. So they originally came up with the rural residence zoning, found out that that was illegal, couldn't do it. Nutrient Management Act superseded it. And just the other week, they came up with non-farm lot zoning, and you wonder what? Anyways, I wrote comments on their motion, that's all. It was simple, not emotional. It was just basically, these are the hard facts. You know, bang, bang, right to her motion. This is Sandra Weber's motion. And I don't know, it just went. It happened. A lot of people have talked about this, and you know, with truth, but emotion, and we all know emotion doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go with councils. You gotta have facts. And just kept it simple. And Reeve Bailey, he said he was gonna pass it on to all the other councillors there, and he did. And lo and behold, it got discussion. That was the main thing.
Yep.
They started talking about it, and it started making sense, and they turned it down. So very, very pleased. You called about 5 minutes after the vote got me on the road. It was great.
Nice thing about virtual meetings, you can just click and
Yeah.
get a hold of Chris.
Yeah, so really, really happy about it. Like there's 1,900 of these already out there. I didn't even know there was that many, and there's no issues. I asked about that. So, you know, let the province police it, because it's their act that says you can do this and this and this. Let them police it, stay out of it, and as a county, and yeah, terrific.
Yeah, and I believe those changes will be coming before our council sooner or later. I believe that comes down for us to look at and agree to. Okay, so let's move to comments by members. Any comments? We'll start with Paul and go to Kevin.
Thank you. I just want to thank the Legion for putting up the banners on our main street, honoring our veterans. And it looks very impressive coming in from the south end of town. It's really good. And also, Tim Poole says he's got a problem that they're running out of poles. So it's something that, a new initiative.
That's a good problem.
But it went over well, and you hear lots of comments about the pictures.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a good problem. You're right, Chris. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And who was next? Kevin.
Thank you, Dave. Good news on my front as well. A couple of things that I've been noticing happening in my constituency in Blythe. The bicycle traffic on the G2G trail. I started seeing more and more people around town on bicycles, so I made it a habit of trying to go at different times of the day, going down past the trail. I would have to say on most days there was 6 to 8 vehicles there parked. On Saturday I went by and there was over 20 motorhomes and such parked there. People running the trail and talking to people in town about the fall colors that they've seen, and because they've been stopping people at merchants and going in asking, where's this, where can I find this, where can I find that, because they weren't familiar with the town. But bringing many more people into town and people enjoying themselves and saying how well the trail being like glass and what the fall colors look like between here and whichever way they're going, towards Goderich or towards Wallen. The second good thing I saw, the fire department has managed to re-erect their fire training containers on the property on that lot that we said that we can put them on there. And I saw 12 very happy recruits this weekend taking a full day of training in those facilities. Again, no, they're not hooked up with the most of the things they had before, but they're using portable smoke machines and using the portable pans that we had before for live fire. But I saw some pretty happy people seeing some of their first fire that they've seen, and seen first some of their fire rescue and protocols and safe operating guidelines that they go through at the training center, getting back up to speed that we've been missing for the last couple of years. On the end of North Street, by the water treatment plant, where it was, there was an empty parcel of land there, and they got a gravel base there, and just Friday they stacked the cans up there with a crane, and Saturday morning they were there bright and early training in them and having a hoot. It's an asset for our North Huron Fire Department to be able to move their training along and add that fire basis, because like I said, I seen 12 pretty wide-eyed and having fun recruits that hadn't been able to get that training before. So that's another good thing for Blythe.
Thank you. Go ahead, Rick.
To you to read, in Blythe, we have the same problem with poles. Our banners aren't up yet. We're early into the program, and we got 22 banners to put up, and I believe there's 24 poles.
Well, that's fantastic.
So in another comment, if we're pushing for sidewalks going towards the corner of 25 and 4, maybe we can have some more poles going down that way.
Good idea.
So we can expand with banners.
Well, there's 2 guys going to be at the meeting, so we'll let them know. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yes, Reed Bailey, I want to kind of, continue with the theme tonight as a positive, positive output to the community. I want to, to give kudos to two community groups. One is the Building Bridges to Our Future campaign. That was on social media. That was a committee that, I would say they have true the test of time in the sense of that, probably that committee is about five years old, maybe even longer, as it relates to putting up playground equipment at the Maitland River Public School, outdoor learning, accessibility to the track, if you recall those discussions about what was going on. So that committee has finalized what they're planning on doing, and they have erected a couple of signs in support of that initiative. I know we don't do this a lot, but on my mind, that for what they have done for our community, in that sense, I would like to see something sent on behalf of council to that committee. It's a one-time committee that has invested a significant amount of time and effort, and in all honesty, with no real support from this council or other than myself and a little bit of Reed Bailey's conversation, but they have done this on their own. They have really taken the initiative and done the ownership and really left it out of council's prerogative about how they get it and how they do it. So I would hope the members here at council would recommend or would agree with that motion to send a letter of thanks and for their dedication and support to the municipality of North Huron as it relates to that initiative in the past. So hopefully council will motion for the clerk after. The second community group that I would like to just make mention of is the Horticultural Society and the Trail Committee. There was an extensive amount of work done in the past couple of weeks to the Wingham Trail as it relates to the gardens and the chips and that type of stuff. Every time I go down that trail, it amazes me what we have in a small municipality in which we live, in the sense that every time I go, I wonder how can this get any nicer or more beautiful as it relates to what we have in the town of Wingham, and as Councillor Faulkner has talked about the G2G trail. Some municipalities would die to have those types of things, and we've got two of them. So, ultimately, and we've got volunteer groups that are willing to accept some responsibility to that. Because I would argue, if we didn't have those people, we probably wouldn't have those assets. So, those support of those groups, not with money. Money's great, but this is the type of stuff that recommendation or showing them how much appreciated we are of them at any chance we can get, I think goes more up to where we are as a council and where we are as a municipality than worrying about where the dollars come from. Because, these community members, and those are just two organizations that I can talk about tonight. There's 100 of them that we have in this community that, I would argue that provide the same level of, excitement to this municipality that I see every day. So, those are just two community groups that I've noticed in the past couple of weeks. There's probably like 100 more, like I said, but it's just enjoyable to be a part of a municipality where it's not all about the negative. We can talk about the positive impacts that we have in this community and grow from there. Because there's always going to be the negative, but it's easier to find the negative than it is the positive. So I think we've resonated in that, and tonight where everything about this comments by members has been positive, and I think we would be apt to say that has been an excellent part of this night tonight. So
motion or direction?
So
I have a draft motion here based on Deputy
Clerk?
Research's comments.
He's
So
good, isn't he, Trevor?
That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby directs staff to send a letter of appreciation to the Building Bridges to our future committee for their work undertaken to support the community.
I will second
You
that
were
motion.
seconding it, so we have Trevor motion and Kevin is seconding. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carries. Thank you very much, Trevor. Anyone else? Notice of motion, there's none. Bylaws, none. Announcements, there's a few. The next North Huron Police Services Board meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 20th, 2020 at 7 p.m. at the North Huron Council Chambers. A special council meeting will be held on Thursday, October 22nd, 2020 at 9 a.m. at the North Huron Council Chambers. The next Economic Development and Recovery meeting will be held on Thursday, October 29th, 2020 at 2 p.m. at the Town Hall Theatre. The next regular council meeting will be held on Monday, November 2nd, 2020 at 6 p.m. at the Town Hall Theatre. So take note of that. Number 13 is other business, not seeing any. 14, closed session, we have none. 15, confirmatory bylaw. Bylaw number 68, 2020, being a bylaw of the Township of North Huron to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by the Council of the Township of North Huron. Do I have a mover? I have Rick moving, seconding. I have Christopher seconding. All in favor? Carries. Adjournment, that the Council of Township of North Huron agrees being no further business before a council, the meeting is hereby adjourned at, I think that's
8:51.
8:51. Thank you. Okay, Trevor, Kevin, all in favor? Carries. Hey, Trevor. So I have trifocals on.